wanted to make a little video on the impact of Hurricane Helene and what preppers can take from the impact from Hurricane Helene. So I'm probably just going to roll some VTOL VR footage in the background. You don't really need to see me for this video. I don't plan on taking too much time with what I've got to say. So first of all, there are thousands, tens of thousands of people that when they were watching the news, when they heard about the hurricane coming in, the last thing that they thought was that they were going to be losing their home. When you live in Tennessee, you don't typically think about hurricanes in the sense of losing your home. So there are a lot of people that are impacted by this hurricane that normally would have never been impacted in this way. None of those people thought they were going to lose their home for a hurricane hitting the Gulf Coast. Yet here we are. So that's one thing to keep in the back of your head, that just because events happen in other places and we may not have the foresight to see how that's going to impact us directly, it doesn't mean that it literally cannot turn our world upside down overnight, which is exactly what happens here. The other thing that I wanted to point out, and again, not a long video, no need for it to be a long video. I'm not a prepper channel that's here to try to rack up views or make a bunch of money. I'm just trying to offer some sound advice. When you are looking for a place to settle, your prepping location, your whatever you want to call it, or this could just be your bug out location. Either way, I know we talk about area studies and stuff like that, but I honestly don't feel like a lot of people take their area study far enough. And to be quite honest, I don't even see even the most well-renowned YouTube prepping channels, I don't even see them telling people to take it far enough. One of the things that you must consider when doing your area study, this is a must, you must consider the infrastructure, not just directly in your location, but anywhere around your location that can have an effect on your location. For instance, are you near a river? Okay. What about the dams and the locks that are up the river, that you're downstream from? Those things like that you have to consider. There are a lot of people back in 1993, which I helped sandbag. I watched people's homes float down the street. That's no exaggeration. I've watched while I'm sitting there trying to help others build a sandbag levee to try to contain this nightmare, I'm watching people's homes float down the street. That is absolutely no exaggeration. It happened in 1993. That was in St. Charles, Missouri, where I was at that time helping the effort. There are scores of people that even then and there never dreamed they were going to be losing their homes. How many people, imagine their home floating down the street? If they do, they probably shouldn't be living there. But places like St. Charles, Missouri, and other places along the Mississippi River don't typically have to worry about that. Like with many things, there was a series of events that led to a disaster. And so we need to look at these things. We need to look at what infrastructure could have any possible effect on us. because that's one place that I think in the prepping community, I don't think people think far enough out. And I think people are, and it's hard to disconnect. I think it's totally hard to disconnect from the way that we live. And so there's so many things we take for granted, and I don't mean that, when I say I don't mean that in a negative way, I don't mean that in a bad way. They are just things that we take for granted, right? How many of you are thankful for the locks and the dams that are upstream of you, right? How many of you think about those daily? Chances are not many. And that is something, as is being seen in Tennessee and North Carolina right now. But that is something that can make for an immediate nightmare in your location. The failure of a dam, a levee. And it can happen about anywhere there's a dam and a levee, given the quote-unquote right or wrong, however you want to look at it, condition. And so that's something that you need to look at when you're doing your area study. Okay, so if there's zero infrastructure, see, I talked about wood gasification and using gasification for combustion engines. I don't think the prepping community thinks out far enough of, hey, what am I going to do when I run out of fuel? It's almost like they throw the whole combustion engine idea completely to the wayside the moment that they run out of fuel. And that, to me, makes no sense when there's wood gasification. Well, again, I think that people taking for granted an infrastructure that's no longer going to be there. I think people think that, in a long-term situation, that somehow the refineries are magically going to start producing fuel, and that fuel is going to magically start getting to their locations so that they can work back their way towards more of a normal life. That ain't going to happen yet. And that's why I've been preaching for over a decade about wood gasification. It is what it is. I don't think people have foresight enough to see the importance of that. The same is true when it comes to your locks and your dams and whatnot. Those types of infrastructure, they take maintenance, they take, updating from time to time, they take people to run them. These are all things that are kind of out of sight, out of mind for the majority of us, and we don't think about it. However, you need to think about it when you're doing your area study. If there was no infrastructure at all, if there was no support, if things just absolutely went haywire and everything that could go wrong did go wrong, am I going to be underwater? Literally or figuratively. And that's what people really need to start thinking about. They need to really expand their horizons in their area studies. Because there are a lot of people that I think that have put themselves in a bad location because of the need for the infrastructure. Other infrastructure is simply roads and bridges, right? If you're in a location that the only way you can get to that location is you have to go over a bridge at some point to get to your location. What happens if every one of those bridges are washed out? So things like that are things that have to really be considered. But I think that, especially with what happened with Hurricane Helene and the aftermath, I think people need to take another look at their area and their area study. This is something I did a long time ago. And fortunately, I'm not in a location to where I need to be concerned with that. In fact, I just had a conversation yesterday with Jen about it. There's a town not far from us called Collinsville, and there's bluffs in Collinsville. Well, the reason why there's bluffs in Collinsville is because the river used to run right up against it. In fact, part of Collinsville at one point in time was underwater. I don't mean like since it's been the town of Collinsville. I mean like way long time ago before we were here. It was underwater. That's why there are bluffs in Collinsville. So at one time, technically, Collinsville had beaches, okay? Now, that has moved a little bit further west to the banks of the current Mississippi River. That's what it was. The Mississippi River literally went up to Collinsville, okay? It's not that wide anymore. And so, you know, it's probably safe to say that there's a lot of towns and communities alongside of the Mississippi River, and in fact, Flood 93 really emphasized this, that would be in deep, deep trouble with the failure of that infrastructure. Okay? So, I would say it's probably not a good idea to live anywhere, I guess they would call that a floodplain, would be to live anywhere in that floodplain at all. And thankfully, we do not. We live about 20 minutes or so away from Collinsville. So that is what it is. Our area, we don't have to be concerned with relying on dams and levees and stuff like that to keep our area safe from flooding. So highly look into that. If you live or if your bug out location is anywhere near where there's any possibility for that type of infrastructure to fail and put your property or your life at risk, you really need to reconsider that. And I think if there's anything at all that can be taken from this tragedy of Hurricane Helene, it's that, again, you don't have to be in a place, a location, or a situation to where you're necessarily initially directly impacted by something. You can have a cascading series of events happen as a result of that initial problem that can still put you in a bad position. And there's, again, tens of thousands of people right now that can speak to that very thing in eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina. So pray for those folks. If you can help those folks, please do help those folks. But again, I emphasize, really broaden that area study and make sure to include those kinds of things. Look up gasification. I urge you to do that. I'll never stop urging people to be directly involved getting into gasification, building a unit, testing a unit, having a unit, more than one, ready to go. I can't emphasize that enough. I don't know why people think that in a massive long-term event that magically the refineries are going to fire back up and they're going to get fuel deliveries. I don't understand that. And without the combustion engine, folks, we just made our lives thousands of times harder without the combustion engine, and it makes no sense to me why the prepping community acts like it's the Antichrist. Gasification, that is. Hey, if you're not willing to put time and effort into learning, actually learning, and dealing with things that you can't just add to cart, then you need to find another hobby, because that's all prepping is for you anyway, is a hobby. Believe me, there's gonna be a lot of people after the big dance gets started. They're gonna damn well wish they didn't treat it as a hobby. There are a lot of people that are going to realize that they were treating it, and never even imagine that they were treating it like a hobby until that time comes. And they're going to be like, holy shit. Because all their add-to-cart solutions aren't going to be enough to fix the problem. And it's going to take actual intellect. It's going to take actual knowledge, experience, skill to be able to achieve what's necessary to survive. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned, including by myself. I'm not excluded from this in any way, shape, or form. I do believe that I have thought about it and thought into it and thought further out than what a large majority of the prepping, and I mean that, a large majority of the prepping community has done. I still don't hear anybody talking about what their plans are for fuel. I'm trying, but I can't get anybody to reach out and say, hey, this is my idea. Or hey, wood gasification is a good idea. We're going to implement that into our preps. I haven't had either one in over a decade. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of distance myself from the prepping community, because it's like, yo, if you're going to absolutely refuse to address an elephant in the room that big and that in your face, then I need to disassociate myself from you. Because that's what people used to do back in the day. Whenever people did wrong things, whenever they acted wrongly in the prepping community, as far as the content creators and stuff, are most certainly, it's nothing but profiteering for them. They're not interested in helping you. If they were, then they'd be talking about this stuff that is beyond the add to cart solutions, and they're not. They're not even remotely trying. You know, you got so many of them, speaking of Hurricane Helene, you got so many of them right now that are running to Tennessee. And do you really think they're running to Tennessee to help? Or do you think they're running to Tennessee because that's the thing that everybody's doing, and it makes for some really cool thumbnail pictures for our videos, right? Our videos really get some big hits from... Come on now. There are a lot of good people that have went there to help. But there are a lot of truly nasty YouTubers that went there for the video and the cool thumbnail pictures and the popularity they're going to garner from going there. They can go there to help others. They went there to help themselves. How can you tell? I don't know. Do you see their face on a thumbnail picture showing you how they're there? I think that's probably a good indicator. Anyway, hope maybe some of this helped you. Shalom.